Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features X-Men issue number 86, cover dated March 1999. And this is part 2 of the Magneto War, a storyline that is bouncing between Uncanny X-Men and Adjectiveless X-Men. The story is by Alan Davis across the two titles. He's the plotter. And this cover is by him, inked by Mark Farmer. And of course, who is there front and center except for Joseph? We have a cover caption, "At long last, the shocking origin of the most mysterious mutant of all." So it has been an ongoing mystery since his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 227 by Scott Lobdell and Roger Cruz, as to who exactly Joseph is or could be, and what exactly his relationship is physically in terms of his genetics to Magneto. And we get Alan Davis's explanation of that here in this particular issue as a means of harmonizing the fact that Magneto is out there since Uncanny X-Men 350, and well, what on earth is Joseph then? And we can see here in the cover design this cruciform shape of Joseph. He's in manacles there on his legs and arms. Between his body we have fragments, images of Magneto in his helmet there, a jettisoned craft that will turn out to be an escape pod. We've got Rogue, we've got the X-Men, including Gambit there, and then we have this figure who's made her first appearance, cameo appearance, at the end of Uncanny X-Men 386. So let's open this one up and get into the story. There are 22 pages of story and art in this issue. You can see that we have the device of the fragments continuing on this splash page, if indeed, well, this isn't technically a splash page, rather this first page we have these memory fragments, and they are of scenes from Adjectiveless X-Men 843, and Colossus here taking Magneto. That was the mind-wiped Magneto after Professor X took his mind out of his body in Adjectiveless X-Men 25. The crashing of Avalon to Earth, and then from the escape pod, Magneto emerging from consciousness and seeing in the shadows a woman. And then Joseph is there. He's been strung up by these strange blue blob things. And he says, I remember. So what does he remember? Let's turn the page, and then we get a splash. So if I can just get the pages apart there. Here we go. So we have our splash page, and oops, this is the woman from the cover fragment, and it'll turn out her name is Astra. The title of the story, it's kind of a witty one, Thanks for the Memories. And the creative team down here at the bottom of the splash page, Alan Davis, plot and pencils. Fabian Nicieza returned to Marvel and scripting this issue, which is appropriate given that he was the author of issues 43 and 44, which are referenced in this comic. Mark Farmer on inks, Liquid graphics on the colors, Richard Starkings on the digital lettering. So, what is the little bit of dialogue here between Joseph and Astra? He says to her, what do you mean? You were the one who removed me from the escape pod. And she says, I did no such thing. Did you take Magneto from the pod? Yes, I did, she says. And am I not that man whose body was somehow made 20 years younger? No and yes, she replies. Before you kidnapped me, you said you were my mother. That was in Uncanny X-Men 366. Well, figuratively anyway, she says. Blast it, woman, he exclaims. Stop talking in riddles. And she replies, actually, I've answered every one of your questions quite truthfully. My name is Astra, and I did rescue Magneto from the escape pod, but not you, because I used the Master of Magnetism to make you. So the big revelation. And of course, the reader is wondering about all of this tech around her. These seem to be control panels, but it's certainly not human technology. So who is this woman, and how has she come into the story? Well, we'll get a lot of exposition from her over the course of this issue. So, you can see the look of dismay there on Joseph's face. You made me, he asks, and she replies, and not very well apparently. The psi mnemonic filter must have been defective. This residual memory leakage should have been screened out during the psi sculpting Krylorian tech. So Joseph simply interrupts her and says, then Dr. Hamal's findings at the Mossad labs were accurate. I really am some kind of clone. And she retorts, clone, please. How provincial. You are the culmination of a plan which was years in the making. A plan I was cooking from the day Magnus recruited a group of young discontented mutants to be a strike force. I was among the first to join his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So here we have a shot of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Familiar members there, from the Scarlet Witch to Quicksilver to Mastermind to the Toad. And standing in amongst them is Astra. And we've never seen her before. So this is a very paradigmatic retcon, retroactive continuity that Davis is plotting here. Let's continue and see what she says. And the first to leave as well. So that's why she didn't appear in Uncanny X-Men issue number 1 back in 63. She continues, he sees himself as the mutant race's messiah, you know. Believes that Homo sapiens superior should rule the less gifted majority. Won't argue with that. Humans are nothing compared to us. But how many messiahs do you know that are willing to do what he did to accomplish his mission? So Joseph doesn't understand. She says, of course you don't, cutie, which is a bit weird given that she's his figurative mother, but it is a very Claremontian phrase, cutie. So just made me wonder, but it's Nicieza's script. Anyway, she continues and says, you weren't made to question, you were made to perform. And then she jabs him with some of this alien tech, and she says, now let's jog that stunted little memory of yours and find out what you've been up to while I was elsewhere. So she's some kind of time traveler as well, and the mystery thickens. But the scene shifts to Magneto, and he's in the Arctic and at the North Pole, more or less, and he is operating this machine. It kind of looks like Kirby tech here, and that could be deliberate on Alan Davis's part, the design of the machine. And we're told that he is in tune with everybody on the planet. The force of, we're told everyone is in some way attuned to the bioelectric magnetosphere surrounding the entire planet. He is attuned to the bioelectric magnetosphere surrounding the entire planet, and Magneto is now able to more than merely tap that energy spectrum. He's part of it, as if it were a taste on his tongue or the breath from his very lungs. His powers surge from his Arctic base, expanding outwards. And we're told that Magneto now owns the world. So this is a very well-drawn sequence here. I like the visuals. I like the storytelling. I think it's well done by Davis. Let's continue. And it really is a representation of Magneto as Omega-level mutant. And then the scene shifts to some distance away. We'll learn later that it's 70 miles away. And the X-Men have crash-landed their Aurora jet. And now they're in the middle of a blizzard, an Arctic blizzard, and they're freezing. You can see that Marrow there is freezing in particular. And she touches off Colossus, and it gives her an electric shock. And Colossus explains, I'm sorry, Sarah, but in this magnetic storm, my metallic form becomes a conductor of electrostatic energy. So Wolverine here is observing the Acolytes' craft. They're protected from the magnetic storm because, of course, that is Magneto's will. And Wolverine says, we can't make a move without them seeing us. So they're being observed on the ground so that they don't interfere with Magneto's plan. Little joke here between Nightcrawler and Wolverine, these old comrades. And let's continue. So Wolverine here, he's got a plan. He wants Nightcrawler to teleport them into the Acolytes' craft. They traverse the space to the Acolytes' ship in seconds. Unfortunately for them, the electromagnetic storm has wreaked havoc on Nightcrawler's ability to navigate the distance. So however that is the case, it means that they don't get aboard the ship, and instead they're falling to the ground. And Rogue says that she's going to reach them in time, But Colossus says, Rogue, don't fly in front of me. And then she is caught by that electrostatic charge again. That's a pretty dramatic panel there. Good angles that Davis has chosen to represent the two characters as they're knocked about. Let's turn the page and continue with the story. So the X-Men come running, concerned for Rogue. Remember, though, she's invulnerable pretty much since she absorbed the powers of Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. And let's see here. So Kitty Pryde arrives in order to tend to Rogue. And there's a little business there about how nobody should touch her with their bare hands. How is she, asks Gambit, and Professor X says, stable, Remy. I understand your feelings for her, but you must remain calm. The energy storm is taxing on my telepathy without the compounded effort of screening out extreme emotions. So Wolverine and Nightcrawler arrive. They're not too badly injured at all because they landed in a nice soft snowbank, which was very convenient. Storm arrives. And the big question is what to do next. I like the detail there of the back of Colossus's costume burning and then just burning away in the flames there from the electrostatic charge. The fact that no one has an answer to what to do next scares the newest X-Man, that's Marrow, more than the situation itself. And Marrow wonders, is fighting against mutants to save humans who hate mutants really worth dying for? So, quite the predicament the X-Men are in. They're caught on the ground. The Acolytes are there to ensure they don't make their way to Magneto's base. And then the scene shifts to Genosha, of all places. And there's a civil war going on there with the mutates rebelling. Even though they're supposed to be free since the events of Extinction Agenda. And here we have this woman. She appears to be British. Where the bloody hell is Charles Xavier? She asks, and her UN attendant says, unknown, Dr. Huxley. So, in light of their inability to obtain the services of the world's foremost authority on mutants, the United Nations comes looking for me, she says. And the UN guy replies, well, after spending 18 months in this rat hole, ma'am, I'm sure your faith in you, in your experience is justified. So, she says, I'm sure it is too, Agent Geller, at the very least, an escort from a SHIELD jumper jet. Makes me look real important. Any idea what the problem is, she asks, as she boards the jet. You'll be briefed in transit, ma'am, says Geller. All I know is that it has something to do with Magneto. So she smiles at that. We get a better look at her face there. Really? Why, Agent Geller? That's the best news I've heard in 18 months. So who is Dr. Huxley? What's her interest in Magneto? Why is she happy to have been called to the UN, summoned to the UN, in order to give a presentation regarding him? Somewhen else, we have Astra again. She is still probing Joseph's memories, including this one where Magneto's mind, more or less, was put into his body. There you are, my little Brummagem, she says, immediately after the Chimelian Matrix buffer had downloaded a duplicate transport pattern of Magneto into a Glixian eugenic restorative tank. And then she sees in his memories him seeing her through the glass. I wonder what you thought then, Joey. Were you thinking of this as a chance to carve a new life as an honest windmill tilting member of Xavier's foolish band? And then she starts mocking him about falling in love with Whittle Rogie. You bore me, she says. You were meant to be a hot knife, but instead you became the butter. Note to self, always keep an eye on your experiments when they're still fresh out of the oven, and also acquire an mRNA matrix of that rogue girl. So this person, this Astra character, seems to be interested in cloning, but using this alien technology wherever it's from, whether it's from the future or what, we don't know, but we have a sense that she, or rather we infer from all of this that she's got access to technologies that makes cloning Magneto possible in this fashion. And then she wants to hit fast forward to get to Joseph's memories that are more germane to her overarching plans regarding Magneto. So here we have that image from the Scott Lobdell and Joe Madureira run. It's intriguing seeing Alan Davis's version of Joe Madureira's panel, because there's something about the figure work there that reminds me of Madureira. Oh yes, forgot to tell you, that would hurt, she says. Here you are using your abilities to accomplish what neither Xavier nor Magnus ever did, to counteract Rogue's absorption powers, if only for an instant. If only you'd had more time with her, things could have been so different for you both. And now you're making nicey nice with your kind of not quite son Quicksilver. Is Pietro still as insufferable as he always was? Pick up the pace, Joey. So now we get to the point of Magneto and his having been pulled from the escape pod from Avalon. And this is the interesting part here. She says, here we go. Magneto first waking up, give or take 6 weeks, and a dozen spatial jaunts. He was confused. I had restored his mental faculties after they'd been ravaged by Xavier. And of course that was back in Adjectiveless X-Men 25. The damage has been so thorough, done on a genetic level, that had I made a copy of Magnus without salvaging his mind, you, dear Joseph, would have been a potato with abs. His reaction was precious after all those years, stunned to see who his savior was. So what we get from this is not really any detailed explanation of how she was able to restore his mental faculties. We simply have to accept it. That's it. And, you know, do you find it credible or not that she's using superior tech in order to restore Magneto's mind to his body, even after Professor X had removed it? Well, anyway. So what happened then? He leapt towards her, something about what he had vowed to do if he ever saw me again, and that's when he got a taste of his own medicine. Getting 2 looks of total shock from the man who prided himself on being so stoic was just icing, because Joseph, that's when dear Magnus first laid eyes upon you. So she makes the clone of Magneto, and she continues, and he was made in order to attack Magneto with his own powers. But how come they're not equally matched? Well, she continues and says, an exact duplicate, except for one important thing. You were younger, and as a result, you lacked Magneto's subconscious self-restraints over your magnetic powers, which in turn made you far, far stronger. And then she's delighted there, remembering back at how clever she was. It was such a joy to see Magnus physically beaten the way years ago he had emotionally beaten me. I'm so glad I retrieved you, Joey. We still have a lot of work to do. Poor old Joseph there. He really is having a devastating time. You'd feel sorry for him with the look on that face of his in that particular panel. Let's continue with the story. So we switch back to the X-Men. Up in the Arctic, above Ellesmere Island, the Acolytes watch their greatest enemies huddle below them. But they have mixed feelings and perspectives about the X-Men down in the snow. And some of them are wondering whether they shouldn't help them indeed. And one of them in particular is Frenzy. And she says, they've saved us, Mellencamp, several times. If it weren't for Cyclops, Scanner, the Kleinstocks, and I would have died in the Australian outback. So a call back to issue 44 of this particular title, Adjectiveless X-Men, which of course was written by Fabian. Was it written by Fabian Nicieza? Or at that point was Lobdell doing a bit of plotting. Anyway, I remember that issue was definitely drawn by Andy Kubert. It was a good one, great art by him. And Scanner comes back and says, why isn't it? Why can't we disagree with the X-Men but still respect them? And another one says, like they've respected us, they've given shelter to Rogue, Wolverine, even Sabretooth, but after Cyclops saved your group, they turned you in. And just at that point, Professor X arrives in his astral form in order to talk reason with the Acolytes, but they don't want to listen. They're all upset. And even though Xavier protests, please, there's no need for conflict. Now, Scanner says, the time for talk ended when you violated our Lord's mind and when you rejected me, us. And Professor X begins to retort, Scanner, you willingly turned yourselves in, but you could have given me a second chance, a real home, she says. Instead, you handed us over to the authorities. Your loss, because I improved my control over my powers, enough so that I can scramble a person's bioelectric rhythm. And this is a great sequence from Davis, a kind of DeLuca effect there, a Professor X being slammed in his astral form back into his physical body. That's really, really excellently visualized by Davis. Great work from him. And another kind of strength of these pages is Liquid, and how Liquid is coloring Professor X in his astral form. It's really effective looking. It's good work. And also what I like about it is that Liquid's colors are not overpowering the blackline art. So we get to see Mark Farmer's inks clearly and distinctly, and I really appreciate that because Mark Farmer is a masterful inker and always extremely well paired with Alan Davis, of course. So let's see here, the X-Men, they're down in the snow. They've got a kind of a tent rigged up from materials taken from the downed Aurora. Again, I like the colouring here, the light from the fire. And then I like the funny detail of Logan on his hunkers there smoking a cigar, as if he's been told to remove himself from the company because he's smoking that stinking cigar. But they've got a fire there that's blowing towards them in the tent. Anyway, he's enjoying his cigar and he says, "Pardon me, but it's hard to get all sympathetic regarding the Acolytes while they're nice and cozy in their little ship. You took a shot, Chuck. We got to get a move on. We head north till we hit the shoreline. It's a better chance of finding something." And a little kind of quiet comment from Gambit here, who had to walk the snowy, icy land of Antarctica, where he was left by Rogue at the end of issue 350 of Uncanny X-Men. Nothing I like better than trudging through snow. No, haven't had the chance to do that lately, have I? Anyway, Marrow here is on board with Wolverine's plan. She says, "I'm with Wolverine, better to die on our feet." But Professor X says, "No, you will not find Magneto by recklessly charging into the unknown, Logan. Our best hope for survival is to work together." But Logan gets in Professor X's face. He's got his index finger jutting at him. So we hug each other while Mags is wrecking the world again. After what he did to me, you're still willing to hold back to do nothing? And Professor X responds, "Whoever said that I was doing nothing?" And again, that's a callback in Fabian Nicieza's dialogue there for Wolverine to that seminal issue 25 of Adjectiveless X-Men, when Magneto finally pulled the adamantium painfully out of Wolverine's body. And he still doesn't have it back in this era. By the way, I really like that visualization of Wolverine there by Davis. It really does show us Wolverine standing at 5'3". The proportions are all perfect for that. And also you have a sense of how thick his body is too. Davis doing a very good job on Wolverine there. So let's continue with the story. We're back with Joseph Otherwhere. And Astra continues with her expositional dialogue. "See, when I created my little biomatrix replicant," she says, "I made sure you did not contain certain aspects of the original. Age, for one, since a younger man would have more oomph. The memories and indomitable spirit of Magnus, for another, because frankly he can be such a dullard. But most important of all, I made sure you did not have Magneto's self-preservational limiting factors. Most beings of immense power, by their very nature, create an internal ceiling to their powers. Otherwise, Magnus, Charles Xavier, these are Omega level mutants of course, they'd slip beyond the parameters of flesh and blood, their own powers consuming them." And the way she's talking there reminds me of course of the Dark Phoenix saga and what happened to Jean Grey, where she gave in to the Phoenix Force. But her flesh and blood was preserved. It really was a question of corruption, and that's why she committed suicide in issue 137. So it's intriguing here what Astra's saying about Professor X and Magneto, these Omega level mutants, and an implication that without any internally, subconsciously created limits. They would move on from flesh and blood and become gods, in fact. Interesting thinking from Davis, if it's there in the plot and Nicieza is just scripting the words. She continues and says here, by removing those limitations, I've opened you to the risk of burning out through the use of your mutant abilities. But as Magnus clearly realized that day, it also made you far more powerful than he was. So here we get to see the fight from the past going on between the pair. Really like this look on Magneto's face there, his bloodied nose and mouth. I think that's really well done by Davis. And what happened then? Magneto decided to flee. And she continues and says, to watch a man whom I'd loathed and loved, respected and feared for so long, reduced to tearing down a ceiling on his opponents and fleeing, so overconfident, thinking, Magnus defeated, I sent you after him to finish the job, while I jaunted away in search of more treasures to complete my plan. So traveling through dimension, space and time. And then she says now, okay, I'll admit, in hindsight, maybe leaving you to your own devices was a mistake. Joey, why don't we find out exactly how you went about botching a perfectly easy kill? So this will bring us up to Joseph's first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 327. But meanwhile, back at the United Nations, Ferris is continuing his speech. He's speaking for Magneto. And watching from the balcony is Dr. Gabriel Haller and this guy from the Russians. Listen to that machine's double talk, Dr. Haller, he says. Anticipatory strike indeed, as if by lashing out first, Magneto is acting in self-defense. And Gabriel Haller replies, there is precedent on both sides for ill-advised action, Ambassador Grigorev. He says, both sides? Do you forget Magneto's blatant attack on the submarine Leningrad? So this is deep continuity, all the way back to Uncanny X-Men 150. And he continues and says, the Russian people have long memories, Doctor, and regardless of the outcome here, when or if Dr. Charles Xavier should arrive, we will act to avenge wrongs done to us. But who's going to arrive? It's going to be that Dr. Huxley from Genosha. Meanwhile, what are the Russians up to? Well, Gabriel Haller's fears are well founded, for at that very moment in the frigid waters above Novaya Zemlya, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that again because I have no familiarity with the Russian language. But anyway, a Russian ice cutter unleashes two very specially adapted nuclear cruise missiles. So there they go. Let's continue with the story. We're back with what happened between Joseph and Magneto. Their fight took place over Central America when Joseph caught up with Magneto. Knowing he couldn't win straight out, old Mags decided survival was the better part of valor, says Astra. Chunk of machinery to the back of the skull at 500 kilometers per hour. Must have hurt like the dickens. So hits him in the back of the head. You fell. Mags trucked it out of there to lick his wounds. Your body lay in the jungle for days, healing itself, until you woke up with no memory of who you were or how you had gotten there. So there is Joseph looking at his reflection in the water. And there he is, found by Sister Maria. You wandered through the jungle until you were found by a nun. That brings us exactly to Scott Lobdell and Roger Cruz's Uncanny X-Men 327. She saw you use your powers and realized you might be a mutant. And we all pretty much know the rest, right? Believing you were really Magneto, you hooked up with the X-Men and asked for their help. Believing you were really him too. I'm sure Chucky was thrilled with the chance to redeem you and himself. And then she exclaims, what a crock. I made you more powerful, more ruthless, and you end up trying to become a spandex Boy Scout. Because of your failure, Magneto now stands poised for an attack which could give him dominance over the planet, and that would be very detrimental to a whole bunch of long-term plans I have for this little mudball. So here's what we're going to do. So Astra is going to be involved in thwarting Magneto's master plan here, and Joseph's going to play a role too, but just look at the beating he's taken there. As I said earlier, you would feel sorry for the poor guy. And here go the cruise missiles. So Magneto, is he going to be able to deal with them? He feels them cutting through his awareness like scissors through gauze. and he tries to subtly, gently divert them into the upper atmosphere, unaware that the missiles were programmed to react to the first sign of Magneto's power and detonate. So these two nukes go off, scissors through gauze, more like electric drills through both eyes. Magneto struggles desperately to minimize the force of the nuclear reactions. You can really see that in the art here, all the straining and stretching of his muscles, and again it probably is blood pouring from his nose there. It's great images from Davis's imagination here. And then 75 miles away, the X-Men, Wolverine exclaims, "That was a nuke." So he sees the explosion. "Yes," says Professor X, "and I would estimate we've less than 2 minutes until the shockwave reaches us." So the X-Men go into action, digging themselves down into a barrier beneath the snow. Storm there says that she's going to try and deflect the initial shockwaves. Marrow's incredulous. "This is ridiculous. We just can't stay here." "No choice, Sarah," says Wolverine. And she says to him, "Wolvie, you're not giving up, are you? Does your X-Men manual say to do that?" "Hardest lesson to learn, girl," he says, as he shields her. "Sometimes the bad guys win." So the shockwave catches them and knocks them over. But will they survive it? Well, we'll find out in Uncanny X-Men 367. Really like the sound effect there in the lettering by Comic Craft. I think it's really, really well done. Good stuff. Good spotting of blacks also on these pages too. Yeah, what can one say except for excellent artwork and storytelling from Davis and the rest of the art team, Mark Farmer and Liquid on the colors. But the big question is, for everyone, for readers at the time, and you, dear viewer, now, how convinced are you, how satisfied are you with this retconning of Joseph's origins? He was not intended to be a clone of Magneto, and in Marvel Comics in the mid-90s, there was much controversy about the Spider-Man clone saga, and people really had, comics readers really had enough of clones as an explanation for characters acting out of character and for duplicates of characters and people coming back from the dead and so on and so forth. So I'm really curious about your opinion on Alan Davis's idea, which had to meet editorial approval, of course, for how there could be two Magnetos running around out there, and what you feel about the introduction of this new character, Astra, as the point of origin for Joseph. So, and also the fact that we have a retconned membership of hers in the original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which didn't last very long. So here we have some letters, one page of letters. This Jason Shepard's letter here is interesting. He's asking, what can he do in order to become a comics professional? And part of the answer is he should contact Marvel after he's done a few writing classes, and look to take part in Marvel's internships program while in college. So that's interesting. So Marvel at the time had an internship program, and quite a number of professionals came through that, including artists like Joe Madureira, for example. And we also have another interesting letter here, which is about continuity. This correspondent says, I've been an X-fan since I first discovered comics way back in the summer of 79. I've faithfully to the present followed storylines, desperately attempting to ignore numerous dangling plot lines. Well, after 19 years, I'm getting fed up. So the editors respond, you've raised a vexing issue, Darren. On the one hand, we don't want to alienate newer readers by knocking them on the head with years of backstory. By the same token, comics are simply the continuing stories of our characters, and it stands to reasons that actions from their past would haunt them in the present. It's a tricky problem with no clear answer, but we're definitely listening to you folks out there, and we'll find a way to make everyone happy, even if it kills us. Very difficult to keep everyone happy. Next issue, the Magneto War concludes, but will it only be the beginning of the reign of Magnus? Yeah, probably not, right? So there you go. I hope you enjoyed my review and commentary on Adjectiveless X-Men issue 86. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comment section. In particular, what you make of the shocking origin of the most mysterious mutant of all, the explanation of Joseph. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like and share the video. It really does help the channel. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.